Okay.
Saja, we have one of your in-house speakers present here, and we're searching for the other one. They're supposed to be around. So I don't
Okay.
know if you want to start your opening remarks, and we'll keep you updated.
Okay. So
Please go
I
ahead.
can start now. Okay. Thank you so much, Peter. It's nice to see you virtually here. So hello, everyone. Good morning to the Science Diplomacy as a Bridge for At-Risk and Displaced Scholars session. This is Sasha Alsobi. I'm speaking from Canada, where it's 3 a.m. now. Unfortunately, due to my nationality, it was a bit complicated to secure my visa to the Great Egypt to be with you today. However, I'm happy to be with you online. I'm a professor at Dalhousie University, a Global Young Academy alumna, and co-lead of Scientists at Risk Initiative, North America chapter. So this panel actually will cover vital key elements to discuss and examine together, include the role of science diplomacy and conflict, the perceiving knowledge and research continuity, and defending academic freedom globally. So, and actually, we're privileged to be joined by such distinguished speakers. Insia Irfani. Insia is a researcher currently at the Premier Institute in Canada. Previously, she held the position of assistant professor in the physics department at a university in Iran from December 2015 until her resignation in September 2022 in solidarity with Women Life Freedom protests in Iran. Since then, she has been an exiled scholar. Following her resignation, Dr. Irfani has been a vocal advocate for academic freedom and human rights. In November 2022, she co-founded the international community of Iranian academies to further this cause. She holds affiliations, including being a fellow of Royal Society of Canada, GYA member as well, Global Young Academy member, and she was awarded the 2025 Award for Scientific Freedom and Responsibility. Thank you for being with us in Seattle, although it's online. The other speaker is Dr. Anne Fresi. Dr. Anne Fresi is Emerita Director and Senior Scientist of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. She is a member of the French Academy of Science, where she co-chaired the Committee for the Defense of Scientists and Vice President-elect of the Académie des Sciences. She is also a member of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences and the German Academy of Sciences, Leopoldina. She is a member of the European Molecular Biology Organization and Academic Europea, and she is a recipient of distinguished awards, including the 2023 Society for Development Biology Lifetime Achievement Award. And also the last is a panelist for today is Dr. Hilly Borsdam, is a professor of history and cultural rights at the University of Copenhagen, where she also holds a UNESCO chair in rights to science. She divides her time between History Department, Faculty of the Humanities, where she teaches American history, and the Faculty of Law, where she teaches human rights and legal sociology and philosophy. Among her recent publications may be mentioned Science as Culture, Human Rights, which is University of Pennsylvania, Studies in Human Rights, and she also co-authored Scientific Freedom, the Heart of the Right to Science. So I'm happy to organize this panel, actually to co-organize this panel with my friend Insia, and to have those panelists with us today. We are going to start this session with Insia. As I mentioned, Insia Irfani is a premier institute from Canada, where it's still quite early for her. Insia will examine the conditions and challenges faced by exiled scholars. Insia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Saja, for the introduction, and I'm also happy to be with you, although virtually. So, hi everyone. As Saja mentioned, it's almost 3 a.m. here in Canada when I'm living right now in exile. So, I should also probably begin by saying that I'm sorry that I'm not with you in Cairo today, but in fact, I'm not the one who should apologize because it is, I think, the issue of the organizers who should reflect on why the two panelists who are themselves at-risk scholars, Saj and I, could not be present at a panel about at-risk scholars, although we proposed a session. This contribution should concern everyone in the room. And let me add something important. This is not the first time that has happened. 2 years ago, I was supposed to participate in the same IAP Triennial conference in the US. I collaborated for more than a year as the Global Young Academy representative, helping organize that conference, and yet I was the only one who was unable to attend because I could not receive a visa again. And now the same exclusion is happening again. And since we are in the science diplomacy session as well, I want to emphasize that after years of the planning and with access to the strong global academic and policy networks, the organizers cannot guarantee inclusion for those most affected. Something is fundamentally wrong with how these events are structured. Before I began, I asked for your 7 minutes of your full attention. Please put aside your electronic devices and to really listen, because the solution we seek begins by listening, deep and honest listening. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ensia Irfani. I'm from Iran and I'm currently living in Canada in exile. I became a displaced scholar in September 2020. I traveled to Mexico for a short research visiting position when the Women Life Freedom Uprising erupted in Iran. I became the first faculty member to resign in solidarity. Because of the threats from the regime of Iran, I could not return home. What was meant to be a 3 month trip now has become a 40 months of displacement from Mexico to Italy, then Germany, and now Canada. You can find the details of my journey in dozens of interviews, not because I enjoy telling my story, but because I feel responsible for raising awareness about what displaced scholars face. I also want to emphasize something important. My background is not in social activism. I am a physicist and cosmologist. I have never trained to do advocacy, nor did I ever imagine becoming a voice for at-risk scholars. I wanted to study the universe, not fight for my basic right to exist as a scientist. But life decided differently. Displacement pushed me into advocacy, not by choice, but by necessity. 3 years ago, when I spoke online at the previous IAP conference, I had been displaced for only a month. I still not understand what being at risk really means. Now, after 40 months of lived experience, I do understand, and yet I have nothing more to say. Why? Because nothing has changed. If you want to know more, you can read my articles and interviews. I refuse to repeat the same plea simply because global institutions have failed to listen. But today, I want to emphasize for the urgency in the Middle East and Africa. The issue of at-risk scholars in Middle East and Africa is now beyond urgent. Conflicts in Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, and lasting crises in Syria and Iran have put thousands of scholars at risk. I have friends, scientists in all of these regions, and whenever I think about them, I cannot stop my tears because I was lucky that science saved my life. But they are alive in the biological sense, but not living. I do not want to be emotional, but we must remember science is not only about knowledge production, it's a human and ethical endeavor. Without humanity, there is no science worth defending. But let's convert this big grief into a big action. A regional initiative is necessary. The Middle East and Africa urgently needs a regional initiative to protect academic freedom and at-risk scholars. There are wealthy countries, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, the Qatar, and the other is that could easily fund hosting programs. Scholars prefer to remain in culturally and linguistically familiar environments. Hosting them with the region strengthens local science and facilitates later reconstruction. Science is essential for rebuilding societies after conflict, but without scientists, there is nothing to rebuild. You may ask why we need a new initiative when there are already a few of them in support of at-risk scholars. Now, before anyone says that IAP, TWAS, and ISC have the Science in Exile initiative, let me be very clear. I was part of this project, but by any meaningful standard, I do not see success. We have reports, declarations, and statements, but almost no impact on the lived reality of at-risk scholars. Empty statements do not save people's life. Since you have potentially listened so far, allow me also to explain why this work is urgently needed by briefly sharing my own experience. Let me speak frankly. When your life collapses, there is no one to support you. The network you spend years building suddenly become irrelevant. In 2022, when I became displaced, I had significant roles. I was the executive committee member of the Global Young Academy, advisory committee on communication, education, and outreach of the Inter-Academy Partnership, fellow of the International Science Council, member of the Young Affiliate Network of the World Academy of Sciences, TWAS, and a member of the Organization for Women in Science for Developing, OWSD. Yet, none of these organizations offered meaningful support, not even a space to share what I was facing. I am sure representatives of these organizations are there, and they can tell you what they have done, if anything. Please do not misunderstand me. I'm not complaining and I'm not even expecting help. I passed my hard days and I survived. But this taught me a crucial lesson. Do not expect others to save you. That's why I co-founded the International Community of Iranian Academics, ICOIA, to be the voice of Iranian scholars. We documented imprisoned students, expelled students, fired faculty members, and the case of Ehsan Faridi, a 21-year-old student currently on death row. I know there are some Iranians in the audiences, so please listen to these things. We send these reports to human rights organizations and to institutions to claim to defend academic freedom. What we have received? Silence, no action. Let me say something deeply personal. Even today, if I decided to return to Iran, my penalty will be execution for my political activities and advocacy. And yet I know that there would be no statement, no emergency appeals, no loud condemnation for the international academic community. That is why scholars in Middle East and Africa need to stand on their own feet and build their own protection. Since this panel is all about academic freedom and supporting at-risk scholars, let me speak openly. The conference takes place in a country where academic freedom is undermined and scholars have been detained for nothing more than their ideas and expressions. If this panel does not address that, then we are not practicing science diplomacy. We are practicing self-delusion. And my final message, I know that what I was said was harsh and controversial, but I cannot keep silent, just as I could not remain silent 3 years ago when my people were killed for their most basic rights. I leave you with this question. If we do not speak honestly in a panel about displaced and at-risk scholars, then when we will be? And one solution, establish a regional initiative for at-risk and displaced scholars now. This is a moral obligation and a strategic investment. Safeguarding scholars today is essential for building the peaceful and resilient region we all hope to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Insia. Actually, these are very important insights that highlight the issues requiring greater efforts to support at-risk scholars and displaced scholars as a human capital, and that added value to the scientific environment, even beyond the humanitarian aspect. I think you summarized the situation of thousands of at-risk scholars. Thank you so much. So Now we are moving on to Dr. Anne Efrasi. Dr. Anne Efrasi, the Emerita Director of European Molecular Biology Laboratory in Germany, who will tell us more about the work within Committee for the Defense of Scientists of the French Academy of Science, as well as the International Human Rights Network regarding academic freedom. Is Dr. Anne Efrasi with us now? Dr. Anne? Yes. Dear Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Now, can you hear me? Yes. It's hard to get closer. It's, pardon? It won't, it's going to tip, right? If I could move it to the side. If it doesn't tip over, it's great. Thank you. Now, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Saya and Sid, for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion. It's a great honor and really quite humbling to hear such stories as the one that we have just heard. Now, as was mentioned, I'm a scientist. I'm a molecular biologist. And in recent years, I have become more actively involved in the question of the rights of scientists. And in that capacity, for many years, I've been involved with the French Academy of Sciences Committee for Defense of the Rights of Scientists. And also I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the International Human Rights Network of Academies and Scholarly Societies. So Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share the scientific advancement in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts and to share in the scientific advancement and its benefits. And this principle reminds us, of course, that progress across all disciplines is inseparable from the people who create, share, and safeguard knowledge. Unfortunately, as we know, around the world, researchers and scholars face intimidation, censorship, or imprisonment simply because their ideas or findings challenge the interests of those in power. Yet the rights that they exercise, the freedom of thought, freedom to teach, to publish, to move, and to collaborate, are universal rights. They are indispensable conditions for the pursuit of truth. Academic freedom, therefore, is not a privilege of academia. It is the lifeblood of scientific progress. When it comes to science, it is the curiosity-driven pursuit of knowledge, often without any immediate application, that leads to unexpected discoveries that ultimately result in developments for the benefit of society as a whole. Pretty much every major scientific and technological breakthrough was built on that foundation. For this reason, protecting fundamental research is not a luxury. It is an essential investment in our shared future. And because fundamental research depends on free inquiry, the human rights of researchers are inseparable from the vitality of science itself. So what is needed to safeguard these rights? It requires independent institutions, robust university charters, and strong international networks. It also demands rapid mobilization wherever and whenever scholars are silenced, prohibited from publishing, threatened, or arbitrarily detained. Freedom of movement is critical. Emergency visas, fellowships, and hosting programs to allow threatened researchers to continue their work in safety, ensuring that scientific knowledge does not disappear with political repression. And for those who must remain in their countries, discreet collaborations, secure communication, and psychological support are essential. So it's in this spirit that the Committee for Defense of the Rights of Scientists of the French Academy of Sciences, called also the CODHOS, was created in 1978. In fact, by a group of physicists, small group of physicists and biologists, who at that time were particularly concerned with what was happening in the former Soviet Union, to mathematicians, physicists, and biologists. And that served as the impetus for creation of this committee. The committee intervenes whenever scientists, in the broad sense, including engineers and health workers, are victims of human rights violations. Its mission is guided by rigor and responsibility. Information must be verified with precision, the situation carefully evaluated, and every action weighed so as not to increase the danger faced by the individuals concerned. For this reason, the CODHOS works within the International Human Rights Network of Academies and Scholarly Societies, the IHRN, which is a global organization that gathers and shares information and amplifies, therefore, the impact of each intervention. I should say that our academy, and I presume those in other countries that have equivalent committees for human rights, also work very closely with their ministries of foreign affairs to ensure that proper diplomatic relations are maintained, but also used to maximize the chances of success of the interventions that they engage in, the academies. So our committee meets regularly to examine cases and sends letters to national authorities, embassies, relevant institutions, even prisons, to request information, to try to improve detention conditions or obtain the release and reinstatement of persecuted scientists. Although the impact of such actions is difficult to measure, a few individual releases or reduced sentences do occur each year. And most importantly, researchers who were in prison and released and then can speak again later report unanimously how important it was for them to know that they were not forgotten, that colleagues around the world were informed, concerned, and vocal. This moral support is itself a form of protection, if merely psychological, and we know how important that is for survival. So our committee, the CODHOS, works in close communication with international partners, such as the Committee on Human Rights of the United States National Academies, which defends scientists, engineers, health professionals facing violations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Arbitrary detention, unfair trials, restrictions on expression, etc., access to scientific life. Together with dedicated organizations such as Scholars at Risk and other similarly focused groups, we form a global network of scientific diplomacy, a bridge for at-risk and displaced scholars. There are also individual programs, and I'll just single one out in France called PAUSE. It's an acronym which I will not go into, but that provides emergency support and hosting opportunities for scientists and artists at risk. Funded by the French government and donations, PAUSE enables threatened scientists to find refuge in French universities and laboratories, allowing them to continue their work, to rebuild their careers, and remain active members of the global scientific community. In a world where fundamental rights and norms are increasingly threatened around the world, and I mean really in the North and in the South, in the East and the West, where even the Geneva Conventions are disregarded, institutions that defend truth, protect scholars, and preserve scientific freedom have never been more essential. Repression aims not only to silence individuals, but to halt the production of knowledge on which future discoveries depend. As we know, knowledge is power. To defend fundamental research is to defend the rights of those who carry it forward. To defend these rights is to safeguard the future of science, and to safeguard science is to safeguard the future of society itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Actually, this information is essential. Indeed, we need to know where and with whom we can further collaborate to secure academic freedom and support science diplomacy and at-risk scholars and displaced scholars around the world. So I think this is really important for all bodies or institutions, or even donors who are eager to support these vital domains. Thank you so much, Anne. And now our last speaker is Dr. Hilly Borsdam. Dr. Hilly is a professor of history and cultural rights at the University of Copenhagen, who will share her knowledge on vital issues in science diplomacy, the securitization of universities, and scientific freedom. So, Dr. Hilly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is the PowerPoint on? Do I need to? I do. I start. Oh, yeah. No, that's the last one. There we go. Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. And I too am absolutely humbled by the beginnings of this session. It was very brave, and it was wonderful, not wonderful, but it was very precious for us to hear this, what you said, NCA. It's important and we need to hear it. So we heard about science diplomacy as a lived experience, and we just heard Anne talk about engagement through initiatives and institutions that support at-risk academics. So my approach is going to be a bit more theoretical than that, because I want to explore the link between science diplomacy and academic science and scientific freedom, and also the importance of openness in this context. So starting with science diplomacy, the use of scientific collaboration to tackle shared problems has been a tool for a long time of soft power and a bridge for cooperation. We talked about this yesterday too. From Cold War exchanges to today's efforts by the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, the AAAS, the Royal Society, and the EU, science has served as a channel for dialogue, as a way to keep communication open where traditional diplomacy falters. The Royal Society and the AAAS's 2010 taxonomy of 3 pillars of science diplomacy, science in diplomacy, diplomacy for science, and science for diplomacy, shaped a lot of early thinking. But in 2025, as we heard Mark Walport tell us about yesterday, the two societies produced a simplified framework for what they call this era, our era of disruption, which reduces those 3 pillars to just 2. Science impacting diplomacy and diplomacy impacting science. And this, what they call, as it says in the report, this action-oriented model is one that is meant to stress flexibility to focus on advancing national needs and to address cross-border concerns and to meet global challenges. During this era of disruption, and this is part of the disruption, I guess, science's role in global governance is becoming more contested. Scientific advice is under scrutiny, universal norms are questioned, and the gap between scientific and diplomatic goals is widening. And again, we heard about this yesterday. Non-state actors such as corporations, philanthropies, and also emerging scientific nations are reshaping the field because they push for inclusivity and for equitable collaboration. Reflecting all this, the European Commission's 2024 report retains the old taxonomy from the previous 2010 report by the AAAS and the Royal Society, but it adds a 4th pillar, namely diplomacy in science, which envisions universities and scientific institutions acting as diplomats of the global knowledge commons, engaging policymakers and the public in general to protect and to advance science as a shared good. And this fourth pillar is one that I personally find interesting, and I have in fact myself written on it. I have no problems at all with the with the ISC engaging as the global voice of science. I think that's fine. But things can become somewhat more problematic when universities and other research performing organizations start to cut ties with partners in other countries for political reasons. Professor Ole Wever, who's a colleague of mine, a professor of political science at the University of Copenhagen, has written for many years about what has since come to be known as securitization, the designation of more and more issues as security concerns. With intensified threats to global security from international terrorism, from wars, from espionage, trade wars, you name it, over the past few years, this kind of securitization has also hit universities, which have become increasingly securitized, turning us scholars, researchers, into science diplomats, whether or not we like it. The securitization discourse is mostly generated by security agencies, national security agencies, and politicians, but we also hear it at our own universities now. We cannot work with, at my own university, for example, we're told by the university, who have been told by politicians, that there are certain countries we cannot work with, colleagues from certain countries. And the result of all this is a restriction or a closing down of international research cooperation. And this is something that affects, for example, the recruitment of international scholars and students. And it also has a negative effect on academic and scientific freedom. Now, I hold a UNESCO chair in the right to science at the University of Copenhagen. And in my scholarly work, I have focused on this particular human right, the right to science, for the past few years. Anne mentioned it before, that the wording of Article 27 of the Universal Declaration. And what's important to recall, I think, is that this is a human right that has been there from the very beginning. It's mentioned in 2 of the 3 most foundational human rights instruments that we have, that are sometimes together called the International Bill of Human Rights. And these 2 are the Universal Declaration and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The third instrument that's a part of the International Bill of Human Rights is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which protects, for example, the rights to peaceful assembly and association, the rights to privacy, to thought, conscience, and religious belief. And all of those, of course, can promote and can protect academic freedom. Anne talked about the wording of Article 27. The other one, the one that is of concern to us who are interested in the right to science, is Article 15 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. You see how the wording is very close to that of the Universal Declaration. Originally, within the UN, the idea was to have one convention written, which would make all the rights outlined in the Universal Declaration legally binding on member states. As a declaration, the Universal Declaration is not in itself a legally binding instrument. So the UN could not agree, and we ended up many years later in 1966 with 2 different international covenants, sadly splitting human rights into 2 different categories. One is civil and political rights. The other is economic, social, and cultural rights. And it's the economic, social, and cultural rights covenant that is of interest to us, because the right to science was classified back then as a cultural human right. So ever since, human rights scholars and activists have fought about which part of the human rights spectrum is the most important. And that is very, very sad, because they are all equally important. But the importance here of viewing science through the lens of human rights is that it argues for science as a global common good. We heard our colleague from UNESCO say as much this morning too. In Article 15, which is the one that interests us when we talk about the right to science, this particular article of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights has 4 different parts. And in our context today, it's especially the last two parts that are important. So, no. See here, I missed that slide. I don't know what happened here. We were just talking about it this morning. There's a slide missing, apparently. Is it here now? No. No? No. Anyway, this, let me just go back here. The fourth part of the COVID, of the Article 15 concerns the importance of international collaboration. And the wording, which I cannot give to you because I don't have the slide here apparently, is that, and I quote, the states parties to the present covenant recognize the benefits to be derived from the encouragement and development of international contacts and cooperation in the scientific and cultural fields. So here we are talking about the importance of openness, global cooperation, and this particular wording is in direct opposition to all of these current securitization trends. These trends don't just restrict opportunities for international collaboration and complement the whole recruitment of international scholars, as I said, they also place academic and scientific freedom under growing strain. Unlike academic freedom, which is inferred from various other human rights, I mentioned some of them before, free speech, for example. Scientific freedom is mentioned directly. This is one of the reasons why I'm interested in it. It's protected directly in Article 15.3 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And the wording there is that the states parties to the present covenant undertake to respect the freedom indispensable for scientific research and creative activity. So we have this directly in one of the three founding human rights documents. I see scientific freedom as a constitutive element of the right to science, a very, very important element of the right to science, and mentioned it before too. And it basically has, I think, three core elements: freedom from interference in science, freedom to participate in science, and freedom to access science. Without scientific freedom, there's going to be no scientific progress that everybody can then benefit from. And without inspiration and input from fellow scientists, citizen scientists, others, local knowledge around the world, individual scientists and their research group are going to have none of those original ideas that are going to lead to progress, either short-term or long-term. So can we perhaps use the wording of these human rights instruments to push back just a little, to argue for as much openness as possible? Arguing for the importance of openness is what we just did at the 2025 Niels Bohr Open World Conference at my university, the University of Copenhagen, just 3 weeks ago. I was one of the organizers of this conference, and the theme was An Open World, the contemporary relevance of Niels Bohr's open letter to the United Nations of 1950. Certain limits, of course, for openness were mentioned at this conference. We also talked about some of them yesterday. But all speakers did agree that without openness, there's going to be no pursuit of ideas. In my concluding remarks for the conference, I quoted the current president of the Danish Academy of Sciences, who said at a panel discussion last year that in her opinion, she's a mathematician, statistician, and in her opinion, you know, the wording that we know so well from especially from the EU context, as open as possible, as closed as necessary, that last part is actually redundant. So why don't we just go with as open as possible? That, I think, I claimed had been the motto for our Niels Bohr Open World Conference, and I think it's a good one because it's slightly more positive. And it may well be, Professor Dijkgraaf, that I end closer on your spectrum to naivete than to paranoia here, but then so be it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Healy. It's actually It's such a privilege to meet you again, though it's virtually this time, to discuss academic and scientific freedom and how we should work to secure science for everyone around the world and to make it an open world. Actually, thank you so much for all of those insights. I need actually now to thank our esteemed speakers, all of you, for your insights and your presentations. I will now open the floor for the audience to ask questions to any of our speakers, and I would greatly appreciate in-person assistance to help manage this session. Thank you so much. I'm not
Thank you
sure
so
is there or Rania. Yep. Thank you, Rania.
And I will be the personal assistant. I can see hands here in the room. Any questions for our speakers? Please go ahead. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Abdulaziz Zaki from UNESCO Cairo. We are so grateful to the organizer for inviting UNESCO to be. Hello, good morning. I'm Abdulaziz Zaki from UNESCO Cairo. We are so grateful to the organizer for inviting UNESCO to be part of your discussion and your sessions today. As you may know, science diplomacy is an important thematic area for UNESCO, and UNESCO is working hard in promoting, advancing science diplomacy through acting as a global bridge for fostering international collaboration and safeguarding the academic freedom. As you may know, UNESCO organized global ministerial dialogue on science diplomacy in Paris last March. And one of the outcomes was the adoption of the Paris Declaration on Science Diplomacy, setting principles for using science diplomacy to promote peace, sustainable development, and global cooperation. Also through the UNESCO chair programs, and I'm so grateful to Professor Hell for presenting the nice work of the UNESCO chair. In the Arab region here, we have many problems, diplomatic problems, political problems that had a negative impact on the scientific community in the Arab region. How the UNESCO chair in the science right to science can help the academic and the scientific community in the disturbed places in the Arab region?
I'm not sure how to answer that, but I think I'm focusing on openness, and that's why you were so brave, Encia, the way in which you started. The whole notion of openness and of being brave and of saying things the way they are is a really tricky issue, I think. You know, from internally at universities, there's political correctness. There are certain things you can't say, and at international fora such as this too, you may want to say more than you actually think may be safe for you. But I think openness is important. And I think also I want to thank UNESCO for having the UNESCO Chair program, the UniTwin program. UNESCO is beginning to use us more than it has before. And the right to science is one area. The safety of scientists is one area that everybody, all member states apparently in UNESCO seem to be able to agree on. A member of the Danish committee in the permanent delegation in UNESCO told me that academic freedom is hard to talk about in UNESCO. It's kind of a hot potato. But if you call it scientific freedom, then it's a lot easier. Then apparently you can gain, many countries will come on board. So I think this right to science avenue is one way to do it. We just have to maybe be more brave ourselves, and we have to work together. I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but...
Thank you. There is another question at the table behind.
Ms. Rania, may I add something to this answer?
Absolutely. And said, I just
Yeah.
saw your hand raised.
Thank
Please.
you very
Yeah.
much.
Just a second, please, for Ansia to make your intervention.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I was following this ministerial level of science diplomacy of UNESCO because I really wanted to see that what's going to happen the level of the UNESCO for science diplomacy, especially that it was in the ministerial level for the first time. And with the time differences, I was really following it carefully. And to be honest, it makes me really heartbreaking when I see that the Minister of Science, Research and Technology of Iran received the floor there to talking about open science and academic freedom in a country, which is one of the worst, according to all the studies that you can see with academic freedom index or whatever. So I just understand that UNESCO is a global organization and they have the representative of the states, but I really want to recommend, at least in the countries that they don't have a democracy, if they are going to talk about critical issues like whatever you call it, scientific freedom, academic freedom, or whatever, which is the right of the scientists, at least have the members from diaspora scientists that they can speak also openly what's going on, because we know that in these countries that it's not democratic, nobody is really representing what is going on. Nobody can really rely on the statistics and information. And we give the floors to these people to speak up about something which is completely a big lie. So I appreciate what UNESCO is doing, but I just see that because of the restrictions of the UNESCO, which is in the state level, they cannot have the representative that they are the really true voice of the countries. And one more thing, why you are just based on the challenge of this, whatever that UNESCO is going to do for us. Each of our countries, we have our own challenges, so we should not stay and wait for an organization like UNESCO to talk about our freedom, or to talk about what rights we are going to have. So if you face something in your country, wherever it is, just stand for that and try to solve it. Don't wait for organization like UNESCO to say something global recommendation that maybe it's not going to work for everyone, which is also true that it's not going to work for everyone. And at the end, they are just recommendations. They are not rules that country is gonna obey them in a legal form. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ansia. Let's go back to the gentleman at the table there.
Thank you very much. My name is Munif Zorbi. I'm here on behalf of the World Academy of Arts and Science, although I participated in IAP meetings in other capacities in the past. I think the science diplomacy business model that has been talked about today and yesterday is a little bit out of date. I think we need to develop a new business model for science diplomacy and depart from the ideas that were talked about when Mrs. Hillary Clinton launched its science diplomacy initiative back in 2007, and the AAAS and the Royal Society launched their manifesto for science diplomacy back in 2010. There are currently 50 ongoing conflicts all over the world, resulting in mass migration of human beings across borders and within borders, forced displacement of scientists, intellectuals, academics, and I don't think the business model that was adopted back in 2007 or 2010 is still valid today. I think we need to come up with a new business model to really bridge this divide between politicians and science. The divide is wider than ever. We have no influence over politics anywhere in the world. No longer are scientists listened to in terms of issues that they raise, in terms of climate change, in terms of health problems, in terms of poor science education, in terms of the influence of AI on various things. So I think it's time that academies of sciences, through the forum of the Inter-Academy Partnership, really came up with new ideas as to how we can really influence politicians who are no longer patient, who've never been patient, actually, in terms of listening to science and science advice. But the situation is getting a lot more serious, and the influence that science has over politics is as weak and as poor as ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Please, yes, and then I have a question from you from online that I think, Anne, you're in the best position to respond to.
I would like to not really respond, but make a comment related to what you have just said, which is very important. As a practicing scientist and also head of all the advanced training in science for scientists at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory for several decades and for the outside, big courses and conferences, I oversaw steady state about 500 PhD students and postdocs, 250 approximately each year, steady state at this European institution, funded by European member states, not by Brussels, just to say. And there, of course, what we see are individuals, young scientists at different stages of their progression after university to graduate school, doing their PhD, some then choosing to leave active research, many staying in active research, either academia or going to industry. Then at the postdoc level, the same sort of decision at the end, what am I going to do? And it's perfectly clear that not all of them have the appetite or are cut out for a career in academic research or even sometimes in industry. And I have to say that for years, we have been advocating for additional training in science journalism and other avenues of intellectual pursuit. It is my firm belief that what we need is to get into our governments, and I'll say this first and foremost for France, are people who know science, scientists. We need to have scientists in every position in society, people who understand the value of facts, of knowledge, solid facts, and capable of actually disproving the untruths. But we need people who are trained as scientists, who understand statistics. First of all, I think that society needs to understand statistics better, really what probabilities are. But I think we need to get scientists into journalism and into politics, into ministries, into all levels of society. And I don't mean to, take on the world by scientists, but at least to inform and to have people in ministries, many of whom have never really studied any science or even really know personally any scientist, to really understand what it's about. And I think that's a first step.
May I add just one brief
Please,
comment?
and then Encia can
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Encia, do you want to go first?
To be honest, I don't really see that what's going on there. So let me just jump in. I just wanted to mention that there is no doubt that we need to reform the science diplomacy because it comes, as always, from global north. So of course, we need also to include the challenges of the global south as well, not to be left behind. That's true. But the point is that part of the fault in the case of the situation of the scholars and the problems in academia is part of the fault is because of the scientific community that they are not aware about their challenges. The point is that we cannot expect others, including politicians, to talk on our behalf. So we should come as a scientist out of our labs and not stay in our bubbles to really realize that what's going on in society, what is going on in the scientific community, what's going on in the policymaker tables, to really be our voices. We cannot expect the ones that they never trained as a scientist and they never really be a scientist to really understand what's going on. So that is the responsibility of the scientists, that I really blame them that most of the time, even in the support of the at-risk scholars, they don't even know what does it mean being at risk. I was in a panel of the Lindau meeting, which is the meetings of the Nobel laureates last let's say in July of the 2024. And we were in the meetings of the more than 40 Nobel laureates. And I really tried to do the advocacy on behalf of the at-risk scholars because these are the guys that they have the voice. They were the ones who reached the top level in the case of the science. But you cannot really imagine that they reached to at least half of them one by one to really explain about the situation of at-risk scholars. And it was for the first time for at least I can say more than 90% of them hearing about at-risk scholars. They didn't know that what I mean by at risk, what I mean by displaced scholars. So if these top scientists, that they have a power and they have a prestige and they are really living a life that even the celebrities are living, they don't care about problem of the scientific community, how can I expect the others to really be our voices? So the ones that they have a power, that they have a voice in the scientific community, they keep silent, and we are expecting politicians to be our voice. I'm sorry, we are going in the wrong direction. We should stand for our own rights. We should not expect anyone to be our voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Hele, do you want to add on this?
Just to add a comment to what you just said. On World Science Day on November 10th, I had, in honor of UNESCO's 80th birthday also, I had organized something with my students in the history department in the University of Copenhagen, where we had a member of the Danish parliament, one of the very few researchers, you know, he's a computer scientist, join us. And that was went extremely well and was very, very interesting. The students loved it because he had a completely different take on this than I had and than they had. And he said to me afterwards, ask us more, you know, because I would love to talk about research and about scholarship. I am never asked. My colleagues don't want to listen to me. So please engage us more.
Thank you. Saja, back to you to close the session the way you were planning to.
Thank you so much, Rania. Actually, I just need to thank you all for everything and for those questions. I need to highlight that, yes, it's really essential, something really important to have those at-risk scholars, to have those people who suffer the lack of academic freedom, scientific freedom, and who are not engaged enough in science diplomacy to get the stage, to get the board, and participate, contribute to framing these policies and these strategies and these even articles. So, and always I mention that when we talk about at-risk scholars, we don't talk about it as just humans that they need a need to survive. We talk about human capital, that they are considered as an added value for any community, for any environment, for any country that they will be contribute to. And we should respect the resilience, actually, the power of the resilience that those scholars have. So although they suffered or experienced the conflict, the displacement, the lack of capitals, whatever, but still they are persistent to keep producing knowledge and to advocate for academic freedom and supporting their home countries and their host countries as well. So they are just an added value. They are just a capital. We need to work all together to support this category and to build our new open world. Actually, I know there's not enough time to comment on this, but I would thank everyone, and please join me in giving our speakers a warm round of applause and sending hugs from overseas. Seeing you soon, hopefully in person. Thank you so much.